everyone. Marilyn Hughes from the Out of Body Travel Foundation with your live stream. We're going to do Q&As today, but we are doing it a different way. We are inviting John Higdon and Philip Segay with us, writers of Man in the Cave. And we spoke to them on one of our previous live streams about their book. We're going to talk a little bit about what's happening now as they're moving into writing the next one. And then we're also going to see if we want to tackle some of your questions, and just it'll be nice. We'll have some commentary from Philip and John as well, and it'll be fun. And so make sure you hit the subscribe button. And also, if you can become a member, consider doing that. Click the join button, and you'll see all your different options for membership with the Out of Body Travel Foundation. Subscription is really important because it makes us more searchable online, and membership helps us to keep our resources for free for everyone in the world. So thanks for joining us, and thank you for joining me, John and Philippe.
Oh, thank you, Marilyn.
Yes, so you had been talking to me about how the energy has changed. There's a big shift as you guys are moving into writing book 2 of The Man in the Cave. And I wanted to ask you to explain a little bit about what's happening.
Okay. You've got to come in at some point. But basically, the way that we understand it is probably a lot different than the way I would say, and I hate to use this word, all the mainstream religions would probably describe it. And we're only talking about a point of language. That's all we're talking about, because we prefer to use the word energy as opposed to language, frequency, vibration. And we believe that everything is communicated with vibrational energy. And language is merely a creation of ours to be able to communicate, which can be misinterpreted. So before we sort of explain what we believe is going on, it doesn't contradict any type of religion. It actually it aligns with it very well. But we're only talking about language, and we all understand our own basis of the whole experience we're going through based on our ability to understand the language. And our ability to understand the language is based on our perception of the language. So when you talk about energy shift, because of the fact that there has to be a 50-50 balance in a physical form, and at the moment it's quite not 50-50, it's probably 80-20 or maybe 90-10 or maybe 95-5 in the terms of the perception of negative energy, then ultimately to exist in a physical form, there has to be a balance of 50-50. And we are told frequently in the cave that this is absolute, and it isn't a question of it might happen, it's a question of it will happen. It has to happen for a physical dimension to exist. A metaphysical dimension exists on the basis that both energies are the same energy. Now, if you look at that biblically in the terms of Christianity, there's many analogies there on the basis that there's no right, no wrong, forgiveness. We have to understand both. And ultimately, you have to get to a point in your life where you do forgive. So you don't judge, and there's no judgment. And we are told all these things from the cave. But we're told it in a way that we understand it. And the way that we understand it is based more on science than it is on religion. Not that science is correct. It's merely the language that's used in the cave to explain it to us, so we understand it. So the balance of energy is actually occurring within this time we are in on the basis that it has to occur. And it has to occur because people have to become aware of what they are. Now, for me, that's an awakening. It's an awakening of our consciousness, which is our soul. And we are going through a time where people are waking up and realizing that there's much more to life than their conditioned life that they were that they experienced, or their many conditioned lives that they experienced before they experienced this particular life. So the awakening is occurring on the basis that it's a natural process. It's not something that we should be scared of. It's something that we should embrace. And we should embrace it on the basis that it will allow us to develop as individuals and understand consciousness, which, of course, source or God. And we have to go through this process to get to a point where we do understand exactly what we are, as opposed to going through a cycle where we repeat the same process and the same process until we do understand. And I don't think there's a hierarchy here of people or souls. I think everybody is going through the exact same process, but they are at a different position of understanding. There's no higher or lower in this. It's merely what we chose to endure before we came into this life and to go through this process. So we chose to have no memories of our past lives and no memories of our previous lives, to actually go through the feeling or the emotion and the vibrational energy to allow us to develop and go further to understand what we are. And that's awareness. I mean, we're told there's no, one of the questions we ask frequently is, well, what do we have to do? Well, there's nothing to do. Basically, the only thing you have to do is become aware of what you are. And the whole philosophy of, obviously, Jesus spoke many times in the New Testament about good and bad, and turn the other cheek, and forgiveness. But this is understanding, because we are all the same thing. We are all the same energy. And when we understand and know thyself, and when we know ourselves, we know others. And the most important thing we need to understand is ourselves. And what we believe the man in the cave teaches us is, well, he doesn't teach us, he makes us aware of what we are. And that awareness of self will bring awareness of others and will help us to develop and move forward into whatever it is that is next for us.
Yes. And I love that you talk
do.
about the knowledge being vibration, because I speak about that all the time. Knowledge is vibration, it's not information. And that we are infused with this understanding that comes from above, energetically, frequency. It's not words that does it completely. We do receive messages through words because we're human physical beings, but it is knowledge coming through vibration and frequency that actually takes our soul into a higher understanding of things, and that awakening that you speak of, and that kind of thing.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, very well stated. So that's very interesting. And so in terms of how have things shifted and changed with the Man in the Cave going into volume 2 of your book?
It's become for us. Well, I think you should answer that one, Philly. How has volume 2 changed as opposed to volume 1 for you?
There's a big change in the way that everything what we have learned from the cave is much clearer now in the volume 2.
Okay.
And it's also because we have received all this information that we are able to understand much more now. So it's clearer and clearer. Each session makes the whole piece clearer.
Yeah, and so that vibration is lifted up every time you have another conversation with the Man in the Cave, because he's bringing you up step by step by step by step, and then all of a sudden it all comes together. and
Absolutely.
it's like a secondary awakening, right?
he told us also that now many people around us are going to and will come to us, first of all, because they are intrigued, but not only intrigued, and they are going to ask themselves some questions that they didn't before. And it's very important for us because even if people can't read the books because they are not at the position to understand what is written in the books, but the simple fact that they want to know more about what is happening in the cave, for example, is for me. It shows that the energy is changing because these people before were very million miles away of subjects we can speak of, and now they are asking questions. It's a big change.
Yes. And you guys are probably coming to terms with taking on this new role in this new stage in your life, right?
Well,
That's different.
we spoke about that, Mary. You've got far more experience in that than me, by the way, because I've hidden myself for many years. And I'm sure that you can speak about that at length. But I don't think really we didn't really set out on this journey to do anything really except meditate. Yeah, exactly, and the revelations that have come through, and even, I mean, we had one interesting session on the 16th of March, and I wrote it up yesterday. It's mind blowing. It's about faith, and I've always called it blind faith. How, you know, people have said to me, I know a pastor who's become a pastor who said to me, well, I have to read, and I have to read and read and read again, and I have to. And I said, well, do you have faith? And she said, not really. She said, I'm learning. And I said, well, it's not really something you can learn, because you either feel it vibrationally as an emotion or you don't. And I've had faith all my life in many things, and I don't know why I've had faith. And we go back to vibrational energy and frequency. That's exactly what it is. It's a feeling. How do you explain to somebody a feeling? It's almost impossible, because
a lot of Christians might call it the infusion of the Holy Spirit. So
yeah.
when you talk about vibration and frequency for Christians, they might understand it more as the infusion of the Holy Spirit, as these increments of awareness.
I think you would, Marilyn. I think you would understand that, and you can explain it perfectly, because you're sitting in both boxes. But I think the reality is there's a lot of Christians do not get that at all, because they literally take everything as words, as a learned thing. And it's not a learned thing, it's an emotional feeling.
It's a spiritual energy that comes in.
It's absolute. It's absolute. There is no question of its authenticity, and there's no argument that it's real. And I think the problem is that we get so engulfed in our conditioned life that we want every single box ticked almost in a practical way, as opposed to the frequency or the vibrational energy. And you know what's occurring in the world right now is a massive shift in energy. And it's a huge shift, but I believe it's positive. I don't think, as we look around, we live in fear, and we live in fear because of man's own fear,
Right.
And the fear is generated by their fear, and it's a cycle of fear. And ultimately, if you can break yourself out of the cycle and lift the energy in a positive way, then you're going to make a difference, and you're going to change it to positive instead of negative. I think ultimately they're both the same thing, but it's very difficult for people to get their head around that, because if you consider on its own just forgiveness and non-judgmental, we can talk about that all day, but to apply it is a very difficult thing based on a conditioned life. But if you apply it in the form of energy, and you apply it in the form of the necessity to balance the energy, it's absolute. it makes complete sense. I write articles for a technology magazine, which is ludicrous because my articles in the last year have become all about spirituality, and this is a pure tech magazine, and they've asked me frequently to turn the dial up on the spiritual stuff as opposed to the technology. It originally started about technology, but they're getting so many readers now are only interested in the energy. And I think the latest article was the new equilibrium. Well, if you look up the word equilibrium, it basically means two different energies working together in harmony. And I think ultimately that is consciousness, which is one energy. So I think
Would you like to tell, for those who might be interested in checking it out, what is the journal that you've been writing these articles for, so they can go look that up?
I've been writing them for 5 years now, and I go under a pseudonym because I was quite well known in the industry, but probably not.
Okay. Okay.
I go under a pseudo because I've been very free to write what I want, you know.
By doing so, I understand.
By doing so, and I think we'll leave them at bay for a bit. Maybe. I mean, they've talked about me sort of coming out within the magazine, but it's highly interesting. The whole thing is, and I think from my perspective, it all started a few years ago, and I don't know whether we should say the word on here, but it all started a few years ago with the process that I believe we went through, and the separation with people based on their view as to what it was we were going through. And I myself had so many questions because I saw so many anomalies within it that didn't make sense. And I logically applied my thought process as I'd done always in business and in my life, and it didn't make sense.
Right.
And the answer could not be found within it, because every door was closed. And for me, the only way I could understand it was to step out of it and look towards what I've always believed is God or consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And there I knew I'd find the answer. And I think absolutely we found the answer. But there's a lot of people out there that are asking questions because we're filled with fear every day: fear of war, fear of pandemics, fear of inflation, fear of lack of food, the food chain supply. Every fear you can imagine possible exists on the planet that people are filled with. And if you're filled with fear, which is an energy, then that's where you're going to live, unless you remove the fear. And if you remove the fear, then you have nothing other than joy exploring life. And the problem is the fear is created from man's own fear of himself, because he doesn't actually believe outside of himself, which is his conditioned life, exists God or a consciousness. And man has to get to a point where he asks those questions. And I believe we are going through a stage where man is really asking those questions within himself.
Speaking
because
of questions people are asking.
Man and woman, of course.
Yeah, a couple of things I'd like to just point out there that really stood out to me in what you were saying is that, first of all, you said we just set out to meditate. And I'd like to point that out for my readers, because one of the things I tell people is, you know, the spiritual practices of prayer, meditation, and solitary time. And we talk a lot about meditation, and I get a lot of emails from people, and I hear from a lot of my spiritual counseling clients who have difficulty with meditation, and they don't realize sometimes how important that is. And this is a perfect example of why. You know, I've talked with people about how they need to be open to these lengthier periods of meditation, the 3-hour blocks, where by doing so, and doing so in a particular way that we talk about on my website, it gives them the opportunity to go to a deeper level of consciousness where a vibrational state might occur. They might experience out-of-body travel. But as you can see from your experience, there are other things that can emerge from simply setting out to meditate. different forms of paranormal discussion, activity, contact that can have very meaningful and very important connotations for the soul. And it starts with that simple intention. I just wanted to set out to meditate. And I think that's really important to bring it out to all of my readers who sometimes struggle with, well, why is that so important? This is exactly why. You know what I'm saying? And then the other thing, just also for some of my other readers, we talk about experiencing it emotionally. And many times we do experience these things emotionally, especially in the beginning of the journey. But for those who are also writing to me, who are going through what are called the dry stages of the spiritual life, where those consolations are withdrawn, we want to remind them too that there are different stages of the spiritual life. And if you're in one of those stages where you're not feeling all that emotion, that is also okay, because there are different things that will be happening over time to each of us through the spiritual life, and dryness is one of them. And it's actually purposeful and serves an intention for the spiritual life that is drawn out over time. And so we talk about that a lot with our readers and in my books as well. And so, speaking of questions, let's go ahead and take a few on. Let's see how we do here. This is our maiden voyage, right? So yeah. Let's enjoy it. Okay. So here we have an email that I received from someone who says, Marilyn, I see things I do not understand, visions, dreams, and words that flow like water. None of it is mine. I often just cry, lament from someplace deep inside that I don't even know. Something is coming. It's been announced on high. Richness and majesty of the blood. I have come under attack. The dark arts, witches, the battle is real. But of course, you know that. It feels lonely somehow. I believe with all my heart some sort of atmospheric saturation is coming, emanating, permeating the atmosphere as it approaches rather than flows unimpeded. Iniquity and lawlessness will be seen in ways never known before. This looks awful indeed in the mystical spheres, yet it is this very uncovering that speaks of the times, of the presence. It is some level of presence. It's so awesome. It brings reverence, awe, and wonder, yet it too reveals the darkness within and without. Thank you for responding. Much love. So I'll go ahead and comment on this. I would say, this is exactly what many of us have seen and been seeing, of course. We're not just seeing it in the mystical spheres. We see it hitting the ground all around us in the world. Unfortunately, it is something that is part of a mortal realm where there is the good and evil and the backwards and forwards flow. And in reality, it is no longer a sense of victory, but a sense of holding the light, being the light, holding our place in the light for that time when it is again wanted. And the embers are needed to bring it back alive. I think that the way that this particular reader explains this is very beautiful in the visual way that it was described. And so I really appreciated that. And I would say that what she's seeing, or she or he is seeing, is exactly what we're seeing happen right before our eyes. But in the mystical, we see it the way that she's describing it. So for those who have these mystical experiences of the energetic truth behind some of the things that are going on in the world, the wars, the financial collapses, the some of the crazy things that are happening in the United States. These types of things do play out in the mystical spheres, and she's seeing it as this atmospheric saturation, which is exactly as it is in the mystical spheres, and it does approach and flow unimpeded. And, just even going back to what you guys are talking about, this is really wherein the remedy that you spoke of, John, comes in, which is every single soul that awakens to the light of God, the light of love, the light of the Spirit, becomes another energetic presence in that balance that moves this energy over in our realm. But, being a mortal sphere, a mortal realm that we have here on this earth, which is where the battles between good and evil rage within us and without us, it's only natural that we're going to see that. We're going to see that continue because it is the nature of the realm. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that, on this question.
He's gonna say, well, I have loads of thoughts on it. The first thing I want to say to the lady is simplification, because what I've seen things all my life, and I've been a busy chap in my life, and it's just confused me, because we have our conditioned life that we live in, and we try to adhere to all the rules and regulations and do our duties correctly. And then when you see something that's so abnormal in your life, it just confuses you. And I also believe through the fear that that man is implementing on man, through their own fear, they're deliberately confusing people. So you've got two lots of confusion, really. You've got the mortal world that we live in, as you term it, the physical world, and we've got the confusion from that, and we've got the confusion from the consciousness, from the metaphysical world. And to actually live in both worlds, which we all do in respect at different times, is very confusing. And it's a plea for help, really, because she's so confused that she doesn't know what it's about and she can't value it. And the emotions are extreme from one end of the scale to the other. And again, I will revert back to what you were talking about, which is meditation. And if you can meditate, you can actually remove all of those fears, and you can actually digest information that's clear. And what the man in the cave is always very clear. And if it's not clear, it's not correct. And the worst thing you can do, because your mind is constantly battling against your soul, and it's constantly telling you that, for me, it's to give you the inertia to go forward and become aware. So the battle exists on the basis that it's a correct battle. But if the mind is so powerful that it overcomes your ability to be able to contact the consciousness, then that's the world you're going to live in. And the world the poor lady is living in is a total world of confusion. And I was living in a world of confusion for quite a long time, until it was cleared up for me. And she wants clarity, and she wants support on the basis that probably what she's going through is a big awakening in her life. And she's going through a process where she's got to come to a point of understanding. And the only way she'll ever understand it is to actually allow it, but to slow it down so it's not so confusing. And for me, that's what we did when we started to meditate. And that was the reason we started to meditate. We didn't start to meditate and expect that I was going to start talking in almost a trance-like state and feed out all this information. We meditated purely because we couldn't deal with the confusion and the misinformation that we were receiving from our minds in the physical world. So yeah, meditation for me is probably the best form of relaxation. And there's no particular way to meditate. I mean, I wanted to ask you loads of questions, Marilyn, about out of body, because I'm desperate for an out of body experience and I can't really get one. But it's absolutely necessary. For me, meditation is down to you feeling in however you sit, you lie, however you are, however you breathe, whatever makes you relax to a point where you can't stop the thoughts coming in. You can't stop them. You can't force them not to come in, but you can put yourself in a state where you allow them in, and if they're not so great, you allow them out again. But you get to a place where you feel the love from source energy, from God. And you feel relaxed into the point where you feel healed, and there's pretty much nothing that can touch you in a physical form in terms of illness or anything. Now, you may be ill when you meditate, but you feel a different type of energy within yourself. And it doesn't really, there's no particular, I don't believe, well, for me, it might be different for other people. There's no particular technique to get yourself into that state. I mean, I literally just sit upright with my feet up on a rock, and I just hold my arms down, and I can go there very quickly now, and I don't particularly want to come back, to be absolutely honest, because and the time just goes whoop like that.
Well, I
It's
think this
almost
is a good place, since we're coming to the end of part one, to preview where we're going in part two, which so one thing I'd like to just point out, and we've only got a few minutes here before the video stops, is that this particular person is actually a fairly profound mystic. And so we have a situation here where I think that a lot of interesting questions could emerge from this. So this is someone who does have a prophetic gift. And so what she sees is going to be different than the experience that you might have in the cave. And you said you had a lot of questions about out-of-body travel. So let's take those on in part two.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we will be right back with part two. Again, subscribe to the channel and check out the memberships. See if you can join us as a member. And we will see you in just a couple of minutes.
Bye.